Dr. Mac and my fellow friends. Today I'm presenting about influence of COVID-19 in forensic field. So these topics, we are following a trend and this topic become very popular to discuss. So I will be introducing about what we're gonna present in our content. So for initially, I will introduce about what is COVID-19, situation in US and situation in Malaysia. So today many people lose their jobs, their family members, their loved ones. However, there is some people fight for their freedom for not wearing the mask. So this is very ironic and this may worsen the situation. So what is COVID-19? Based on WHO, COVID-19 is a coronavirus disease 2019 or COVID-19, which we call it severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2, or what we call SARS, that happened in 2003, which is more wider or spread more serious. So in Malaysia, the situation getting worse and worse, but currently the cases are decreasing. So Malaysia has accumulated roughly 2 million confirmed cases, while in US there is approximately 42 million cases reported. So this is a big topic to discuss about. So thus, the study would like to discuss on impact of COVID-19 on forensic psychologists, legal system, and scamming. So
Okay. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Elisa from the Malaysian campus, and for my part, I will be talking about the influences of forensic psychology and also the roles of forensic psychologists in the United States and also in Malaysia. First and foremost, I will be focusing on the history of forensic psychology. William Wundt, who is known as the father of psychology, was also the first person to discover forensic psychology in 1879 when he discovered his very first lab in Germany. So ever since one, he had really inspired many other well-known psychologists to contribute in the field of forensic psychology. And one of the examples of a well-known psychologist would be James McKim Cattell. Cattell was the head department of psychology at Columbia University. And in 1895, he conducted an experiment where he was asking a series of questions to the students from the same university as well and rated their answers based on how confident they were. And he then discovered after the experiment that even the students that answered those questions with the most confidence had very inaccurate responses as well. And thanks to his experiment, this has inspired many other psychologists to start their own experiments based on eyewitness testimony. Alfred Binet, who is a French psychologist. So in 1896, he was one of the psychologists that replicated Cattell's research and wanted to study more on the results of other psychology experiments that were mostly based on criminal justice and law. And fun fact, he also created the Stanford and Binet intelligence scales. And during his time, this was used to study, to see which children in the French education system who were below average in intelligence and needed, and would require a special education. So one psychologist that have used his testing was Louis Terman. He used the Stanford Binary Intelligence Skills to help determine which members were the best candidates for the police force. And apart from that, this is also and the test was also used to really help out the legal system, which had really defined the world of forensic psychology. And so another psychologist, William Stern, he conducted this very intense experiment in 1901 where he staged a heated argument between two students as an experiment. And during that, the heat of the moment, one of the students pulled out a gun. So after the fight, they were both of the students were asked to remember how the fight went, to recall the fight. And there were many errors that were made from two of the students, after the argument ended. And thanks to Stern's experiment, this has given a very this experiment was very helpful because it really helped demonstrated how prone eyewitnesses could be in court, as well as how the emotional stability of a certain crime can really influence eyewitness eyewitness memory of the account. Okay. So, okay, let's talk about the forensic psychology in the United States. A forensic psychologist who is also known as a criminal profiler collaborated with their job is to collaborate with the law enforcement to help create a very detailed profile of the criminals based on any common psychological traits. So apart from that, forensic psychologists, they are mostly focused on the behavior of the criminals and use that and address their behaviors by using based on psychological theories to legal issues. And apart from just forensics, forensic psychologists also, they get to study a lot about the criminal justice, since they are since the court and the forensic psychologists, they work hand in hand together, and also clinical psychology. Forensic psychologists, they work very collaboratively with the legal system. And one of it would be to conduct screenings or assessments of prisoners, investigating psychological disorders among their criminal and court defendants, help to examine to see whether if the criminals, to see whether the criminals are able to stand trial depending on their mental state. So if their mental state is bad, they don't have to, stand trial just yet until, they are mentally better. And last but not, and apart from, and also, forensic psychologists, they are frequently called to help testify in the court usually on behalf of the defendant to help support a police or the prosecutor's theory about the criminal defendant's intent. Okay, last but not least, forensics, apart from just working, with the law enforcement and also the legal system as well. Wait, hold on. I'm so sorry. Okay, apart from just forensic psychologists working very closely with the court, with the legal system and um, the law enforcement. I'm so sorry. Forensic psychologists, they are also responsible to build trust and relationships with their clients by providing a one-on-one therapy session. And these sessions are not only for to conduct a research or for study purposes, but this can also be very therapeutic for the patients too. Since these patients are basically prisoners, they are incarcerated for years and years to come. So obviously that would lead to a very stressful lifestyle and may develop mental health issues such as depression and anxiety. So yeah, it's important for a mental health professional to be a part of their lives, so they are able to get their mental health in check. Yeah. So now let's talk about the world of forensic psychology in Malaysia, which is it's pretty close to non-existent mostly. So unfortunately, forensic psychology as a university course and a job is not common in Malaysia. I mean, we do have criminology, but that job in Malaysia isn't as it's not an easy job to find, compared to many other psychological related jobs such as clinical psychologist, counseling, therapy. But instead, we have psychology officers that are mostly in charge of to give out therapy, advice, and also support to the prisoners. Although I'm gonna show this to you later on, it is psychology officers is not provided for all the prisons in Malaysia, and based on the Section 36 of the Prison Act 1995, prisoners with prisoners with mental disorders are to be managed in a psychiatric hospital, and this arrangement would only apply to prisoners that are sentenced by law. And so in order for a prisoner to get diagnosed with a mental disorder, they would have to go through 4 stages. The first stage would be health screening upon reception, such as checking any other health symptoms that aren't mental health related, if that makes any sense. The second stage would be the prisoners that are experiencing any symptoms will be directed to an outpatient clinic. So the prison, by doing this, the prison authorities will have to do this in different prison blocks or in rehabilitation programs. And then we'll go on to the third stage where a clinical psychologist would do a the prisoners would have to do a psychometric testing that is given by the clinical psychologist. For example, would be the depression, anxiety, and stress scale, and the test is to be completed within 14 days. And apart from that, there is no, 3 stages. And apart from that, there is no any in-house psychiatrist for the prisoners. So if the prisoners are displaying any symptoms of mental illness, they would have to be referred to a government hospital that has psychiatric services. So okay, this is one of the example, an example when I said that we have very limited psychology officers in Malaysia. So according to the Straits Times, Police officers are desperate to look for 100 psychology officers for prisons in Malaysia. And yeah, there are only 45 psychology officers that are on top of the service, and with more than 100 counselors since 2011. However, this is still not enough to provide psychological help and support for the prison inmates. So yeah, it's pretty unfortunate how, the prisoners, their mental state aren't as looked upon, which is pretty sad. So anyways, okay, let's talk about the effect towards Malaysian prisoners without forensic psychology. So what happens when, when forensic psychologists aren't really known, especially the effect that would do towards the Malaysian prisoners? Because since prisoners are seen as dangerous, especially more than dangerous when they have a mental condition. So these mentally ill people / prisoners are very stigmatized and would be more than likely to be charged in a criminal justice system, even for small minor offenses. Apart from that, police officers in Malaysia, they are not well educated when it comes to mental illnesses because they are not psychologists. They are not forensic psychologists, and may mistake their mental illnesses as they may mistake, for example, psychosis for drug abuse or alcohol, which is pretty common here in Malaysia. And since many police officers are very undertrained, and the Malaysian hospitals are very under-equipped to even have to deal with people who might be suffering from a manic episode or a psychosis. Since these prisoners who are in a very, very vulnerable position, by the end of the day, they would resort to using prison as a detention facility. And last but not least, the individuals in psychological distress will wind up in prison. Based on the section 39 of the Penal Code, it is actually illegal to attempt suicide. So yeah, if someone tries to attempt suicide in Malaysia, you are to be charged by the law here. So yeah, and this is an article that was made, because many, of course, there are like thousands of people in Malaysia that disagree and should decriminalize suicide because it is not a crime. It is a cry for help. So yeah, and these are just the statistics of how bad the mental illnesses are for prisoners compared to the general population in Malaysia. And these are the statistics for prisoners with psychotic disorders, depressive disorders, and other mental illnesses. You can just see it right here, which is very, very unfortunate. I really wish Malaysia had a better system to provide a better good mental health services for prisoners, since they are also humans. So that is all for me today, and these are all my references. So yeah, thank you.
First and foremost, hello, I'm Brian. I will be discussing changes in policing in United States of America and Malaysia. So there is 5 changes in the police force. So first and foremost, the police service demand have been changed. There's some for example, the demand for police service costs increases or decreases. Furthermore, organization change. The police agencies started to change their and reform their organization from remote work to from physical work to remote work, or proactive to more remote work style. So, and this will be discussed detail in reactive and proactive activities. Furthermore, the COVID-19 also affect and make police officers at risk. So we will be discussing on the health and safety also. And subsequently, relation with the community and police legitimacy will be discussed. So the study will be comparing the differences between Malaysia and US. So the police service demand. So in Malaysia, the demand in police service reduces. This may due to the reduction in crime rates. So according to Chin 2020, the crime rate nationwide in Malaysia fell 23%. And the study believed that the reduction in demand of police service in Malaysia may due to the lack of trustworthiness towards police in Malaysia, because the previous stereotype towards the police involving corruption and whatnot, making the public disbelief in police. So from the survey of 1,000 and above people, reported that 45% of them disbelieve in police in Malaysia. On the other hand, in United States, a survey about 1,000 police agents in US and Canada indicated that they have significant decrease in calls for police service. However, they found out that it varies between locations. For instance, between location and between different type of calls. So, for example, burglary calls decrease in Los Angeles, and while not in Indianapolis. So Indianapolis increases. This may due to the difference in socio-economic and other factors may contribute in this. Furthermore, organizational change. So in Malaysia, the defense minister announced that the classes, training, and all the police internal training are not permitted. So this situation causes the pressure, the workload of the remaining police increase. Therefore, when the cases starting to decrease, the Royal Malaysia Police PDRM announced to recruit police officers to ease this situation and for future purpose in handling all these kind of massive pandemic kind of cases. So 6,800 vacancies were proposed, and people were looking into the vacancy. So another interesting survey found that the police were found to continue working for 10 months. So we can see how pressured they are. On the other hand, in United States, they encourage remote work and they adjust their manpower, such as suspending in-person training and recruitment, adjusting roll calls, and assigning officers. So instead of restricting and stopping all those activities, United States choose to reduce or slowing down all the process. So agency also provide special training in about social distancing, so which Malaysia don't have. So officers were also instructed to perform less arrests in this pandemic to reduce their manpower and focus it on to maintaining and controlling the pandemic. On the other, furthermore, to explain it in detail, reactive and proactive activity. So Malaysia, like I mentioned just now, training and recruiting were stopped during the pandemic, and the COVID also affect that the police in from lenient to strict. So the police perform and enforce the SOP, and they perform in a more harsher way in arresting the violators. So from the survey, police in Malaysia have arrested more than from the report, police in Malaysia have arrested more than 4,000 violators, and there is even violators jump off the bridge from avoiding arrest. Moreover, in Malaysia, to reduce the workload of the police, the government also announced a collaboration between Malaysian Volunteer Corps or RELA and armed force in enforcing the SOP. However, in United States, they're changing from handling calls of service from a team to handling call for service alone. And they reduce their arrests, like I mentioned just now, and they also propose a formal policy in limiting proactive traffic pedestrian stops. Okay. Subsequently, the health and safety. So there was nearly 40,000 police and their family members tested positive in March. So the Malaysian police officers were in risk as all those roadblocks and increase as our cases increase. So the SOP become more strict, and the lack of PPE also contribute to this situation. Furthermore, they also work without any rest. So like I just mentioned out, they work continuously and they have worked non-stop about 10 months. So in United States, they provide comprehensive training and guidance to the officer on how to perform the SOP in social distancing and protect themselves from increasing the risk of getting the virus. So a guidance is provided. In compared to Malaysia, there is no guidance provided. So the PPE, I think most of the country initially the PPE is in low, a very low amount of them. So there is insufficiency in PPE also make the police of in US at risk. So like workload, extra training and whatnot also causes mental health problem to the police in US. Lastly, the relation with the community and police legitimacy. So in Malaysia, the relation between police with the community getting worse and worse because Malaysia changes from a lenient way to a harsher way in enforcing the SOP. Therefore, there is some conflict between them. And furthermore, the constant changes in SOP often become a problem. And like I mentioned, another contributing factor will be the trustworthiness of the policies. And this also become a problem for them. So the relationship become very troublesome and become a big issue for Malaysia. So in United States, limiting public access to public buildings and suspending in-person community engagement program is what they have enforced. So the US enacting an appropriate government rule and regulation will be very challenging because they're more liberal there is more people who seek for freedom. So there is misunderstanding and conflicts between them, although the policy is enacted by the government. So this deteriorates the relationship between the officers and the community. So final thoughts. I think from what I have studied about the police, I really pay my deep concern to them and pay my respect to them. And I have learned that we must adapt to the environment to become a more better us, like getting ourselves vaccinated, wear masks although we are vaccinated, and always respect and understand that there is people fighting in front, and we cannot be like a selfish person, just go out simply. So the reference is here. That's all from me. Okay, thank you Dr. May and my fellow friends. Goodbye.
Hello, my name is Lim Jiahui. I'm from the group with the topic of effect of COVID-19. The subtopic that I am responsible for is the effect of COVID-19 on court backlogs. In this video, I will talk about the situation in both in the US and Malaysia. Lastly, I will compare the situation between these two countries and summarize about it. First thing first, let's talk about the general impact of COVID-19 on courts operation. According to my research, there are a few of countries that allow the physical operation of courts because they are listed as essential service. However, in the US and Malaysia, courts are not essential service, so online courts are implemented to ensure the access of justice. So, of course, to have online courts, there are some basic requirements such as the internet access, computer with camera, and also people's acceptance to online courts. If people refuse to have their cases to be heard online, it can only be postponed and rescheduled. Also, if people do not have the basic requirements for online trials, their case cannot be progressed to. That's why online courts receive a lot of criticism at the beginning. People are questioned with the effectiveness, transparency, and fairness of online courts because anything could happen outside the screen. And all these challenges leads to court backlogs with different level in different countries. So now, let's start with the situation in the United States first. So in the US, the virus started to spread widely in March 2020, which is last year. All state Supreme Courts shut down trial courts and reduced them to emergency function. They also excused people who over 60 years old from jury duty because they are more vulnerable to the virus as compared to the younger people. Initially, the Supreme Courts closed all in sudden and only provide little guidance beyond all the postponements. However, the Supreme Courts then released press about the details and arrangement for future oral arguments every month on their official website. Although online courts were implemented, lawyers still test positive one by one. This leads to the closures of offices and many other operation restrictions. So, adaptation to online courts slowed down the process significantly, and this resulted to an add-up court backlogs. Not to mention that there are already a lot of backlog cases before the pandemic. During the pandemic, the rate of case disposition dropped more than 50%. For example, New York City, which is the biggest criminal jurisdiction in the country, held just 1% of jury trials of prior year. Also, the Orange County, which usually has more than 900 trials in a full year, held about only 115 trials in the 10 months, which is from the start of the pandemic, which is March 2020 to December 2020. California's court system also resolved 1.4 million fewer cases as compared to previous year. Besides that, their attorneys reported that they have double caseloads due to the pandemic. And the statistics shown here only reflect the surface of an iceberg. There might be more and more that yet to be disclosed. In overall, the average court backlogs increased by about 1/3 in the United States. So here are some examples of victims from court backlogs in the United States. According to Fresno criminal defense lawyer Mark Broughton, COVID-19 delays the justice for one of his clients who is facing insurance fraud charges. Due to the backlogs, his client cannot work and face difficulties in raising his 3 kids. Besides that, Ontario's Chief Justice also shared their experiences on this issue. According to Chief Justice Morawitz, COVID-19 has caused delays that have aggravated the already significant difficulties of making post-separation arrangements in family cases. Chief Justice Strati also shared that COVID-19 shone a bright and critical light on the vulnerabilities of society by magnifying pre-existing inequalities. It means that people who have difficulties of internet and computer access are even more difficult to have their case resolved during this pandemic and the adoption of online court. So, to resolve the massive backlogs, there are some prosecutors prepared to drop low-level cases and prioritize cases involving violent crime. This provides an opportunity to throw out a vast number of pending cases that do not have actual victims, and also raises concerns about dropping cases might convey a message of "you don't matter as much" to the communities. This is a serious matter because it might make the communities feel ignored and also rejected, which leads them to have a sense of disappointment to the country's legal system. So this is basically what is happening in the US regards to the issue of court backlogs due to COVID-19. So now let's move to Malaysia. In Malaysia, the government implemented different levels of MCO, which is the short form of Movement Control Order, according to the situation in the country to prevent further spread of the virus. In different phases, there are different SOPs, which is the short form of Standard Operating Procedure. This different SOP limits the operation of courts differently. Similarly, the virus started to spread in Malaysia in March 2020. Since then, MCO started and courts closed because they are not listed as essential service by Malaysia government. So we adapt to e-courts and online hearings and postpone criminal trials. The operation of online courts continued until May 2021 this year, where the Malaysians entered the third time of MCO due to increase in COVID cases. In MCO 3.0, the government allowed open courts with limitations. Criminal cases that have been postponed for the whole year can be proceeded in open courts during this phase, but with priority to pre-2020 cases. However, 1 month later, which is in June 2021, Malaysia entered the first phase of total lockdown, where everything back to the initial point. All cases set for physical management are adjourned. In short, Malaysia adapted to online courts since the start of the pandemic until recently. So of course, when people face something new and not familiar with, they have questions. In Malaysia, people also concerned with the effectiveness, transparency, and fairness of online courts, as well as concern in court backlogs. It is because lawyers were quite unreceptive to online hearings, according to Chief Justice of Malaysia. Besides that, Malaysian lawyers are also facing the common objection against online hearing, which is the perceived inability to have a fair hearing and also loss of advocacy skills. The Malaysians also are facing objections from the Bar Council to proceed with criminal trials virtually due to the concern about the possibility of witness coaching in online trials. So how COVID-19 affect the progress of court cases in Malaysia? Here are some statistics about the disposal rate of Malaysia courts during the pandemic last year. With the highest rate of 75% in the high courts and the lowest rate of 43% in the Court of Appeal. Although the rate seems that online courts in Malaysia is somehow effective, but COVID-19 still caused backlog of cases. Backlog of cases in Malaysia can be observed obviously in the industrial courts. It is because the industrial courts do not open for months during CMCO. There are no online hearings at all during these few months when other courts are having online trials. Hence, cases are piling up. As I mentioned before, COVID-19 caused many trials and cases to be postponed and rescheduled. Here are some examples of Malaysia's high-profile cases that are affected by COVID-19. First, it is Datuk Seri Najib Razak's 1MDB trial. Datuk Seri Najib Razak was Malaysia's former Prime Minister, and I believe that most of you know about him and his case. Hence, every Malaysian follows the latest news about his case closely. However, due to COVID-19, this case kept being postponed and rescheduled. At first, it was Najib who needed to self-quarantine after he came back from an election campaign. Then, his lead defense lawyer and the whole team need to quarantine due to close contact to person who tested positive. After that, there are some serious COVID-linked issues. So the trial of this case keep postponing from month to month. The next example is also from Datuk Seri Najib Razak. Similarly, the date of the trial keep changing, postponed and rescheduled due to COVID tests and self-quarantines. Another example is from Datin Seri Rosma Mansor, who is the second wife of Najib. Again, similar to the previous cases mentioned, the hearing postponed and rescheduled, but this time is due to the testimony in this case. So in conclusion, trial dates were postponed and rescheduled repeatedly due to the pandemic. It is not just because of the health condition, but also the SOP in different phases of MCO. So lastly, we come to the comparison between two countries. So in the US, they excuse people who may be vulnerable to the virus to protect them, but in Malaysia, they did not. And also in the US, courts are facing tremendous court backlogs, but in Malaysia, court backlogs is still bearable and relatively acceptable. Besides that, data about court backlogs is easy to be found and accessed in the United States, but in Malaysia, they release information focusing on the disposal rate rather than the backlogs. And when the courts are reopening, they are dropping low-level cases in the US, but in Malaysia, they mention giving priority to previous pending cases instead of mentioning dropping cases. Despite the difference, COVID-19 impact both countries same by causing court backlogs, adaptation to online courts, and questions to the effectiveness of online courts. So here are the references where I got the information from. And before I end my presentation, I would like to share a piece of my mind about this issue and also what I have learned from this group project. First of all, every country has their own unique legal system and management according to their own culture and people in the country. There are no definite right or wrong. Besides that, every country around the world impacted by COVID-19. People are adapting to new lifestyle, and so do the courts. Moreover, I think that how COVID-19 forced us to adapt to online courts, it shows the importance of having a stable online services and system to handle emergency like the attack of coronavirus. The government, so I think that the government should encourage developing online service as the technology keeps developing. Last but not the least, the most important thing that I have realized again and again is the danger of COVID-19. People are sick and die due to this virus. Economy is affected by this virus. The whole world is changing due to this virus. So let's practicing wearing a mask and washing hands regularly to protect ourselves and also our friends and families. That's all from me. Thank you. Bye bye.
My name is Brianna Daly, and I will be covering how COVID-19 has affected procedures and law enforcement. Courts, jails, prisons, and law firms are changing the way they operate due to COVID-19. From March to April 2020, the Supreme Court closed all its doors to visitors and the public, as well as postponing oral arguments. In Arizona specifically, judges were authorized to suspend local court rules and orders. This caused state courts to try and use virtual tools to still run business as usual. In some jurisdictions, jury duty was excused for people who were 60 and over and those who were deemed as vulnerable or high risk to the virus. Doing this could have put a restriction on court operations, which would have posed an issue for those who were incarcerated and waiting for trial. The Federal Department of Corrections announced that all 122 federal correctional facilities would not be allowed to have visitation from family, friends, or attorneys for 30 days during the beginning of COVID. Many police departments decided to limit arrests so there would not be much person-to-person contact. In Colorado, police were ordered to issue a summons instead of arresting someone suspected of low-level or nonviolent crimes. At the beginning of COVID, the U.S. Supreme Court postponed in-person oral arguments and held them by phone and made live audio of the arguments available to the public. The Marshall Project and Associated Press confirmed that over 95,000 people in prison tested positive for COVID-19 and 847 people died from the virus. It was also reported that there were over 21,000 cases among prison staff and 65 deaths. It was hard for people in correctional settings to social distance or take precautions because of the high capacity. Inmates had to share cells, double and sometimes even triple bunking, and had limited space to spread out in the facilities. Early on in the pandemic, some state correction departments and local jails decided it was best to limit their intake and transfers of some inmates from county jails to state prisons. There were at least 17 states, including Washington, D.C., that suspended all visitation. In order to make up for this, corrections departments and local jails provided free telephone calls and other methods of communication. Florida was one state that offered 2 free phone calls for up to 15 minutes and 2 free emails for each inmate per week and 1 free video visitation. From March to May of 2020, Malaysia did not allow the public to have any access to court buildings unless it was a critical application in criminal matters. From May to June of 2020, court officers were allowed to return to work on a rotational basis. Starting from June 2020 to now, most courts resumed to full operation with guidelines that include social distancing, remote hearings, court management measures, and enhanced cleanliness and hygiene control. In March of 2020, the Malaysian judiciary issued that Malaysian court systems would operate through e-review systems, exchange of emails, and video conferencing. They introduced the remote communication technology, which enabled the court to conduct proceedings through live video or television link, or any electronic means of communication. Those who are part of law enforcement in Malaysia were asked to adjust to the new measures being taken in court buildings. Court staff were required to have their temperature taken every day before entry to work. They were asked to practice social distancing. They were asked not to attend court proceedings if they were under quarantine or medical surveillance by the government, and they were also asked not to attend if they weren't feeling well or had any fever or flu-like symptoms. For visitors, the Malaysian judiciary developed a visitor tracing system using a QR code. This QR code recorded visitors entering the court premises nationwide beginning in June of 2020 as part of an effort to do contact tracing and to stemming the spread of COVID-19. The U.S. courts, as well as the Malaysian courts, had a lot of similarities in their practices during COVID-19 following their procedures. It seems as if both courts decided to limit their in-person contact to protect the public as well as their court officials.
Hello, everyone. My name is Adriana Thompson, and today I will be speaking with you about the effects of COVID-19 as it relates to recruitment amongst law enforcement officers. The effects of COVID-19 has affected us all in ways which cannot be explained by words alone. 2019 was one of the most toilsome years that anyone breathing in this day and time has ever encountered. Nearly everyone has suffered an unfathomable loss due to the extreme effects of COVID-19. Hospitals were filled to capacity and roadways were overflowing with citizens across the world, rushing to stores to buy necessary products that were becoming more and more scarce by the minute. We were all experiencing a time like no other. COVID-19 was amongst us, and no one was prepared. The term essential worker came about as businesses and human support services across the world began closing their doors to members of the general public. We all learned that there were some doors which could not be closed, as well as some services which could not be discontinued. Amongst those doors were police departments throughout the world. Although their doors were open, many services continued to be delayed due to the extreme shortage in staffing. Police recruitment has suffered as a result of COVID-19. The problematic causes of low recruitment numbers during the pandemic are workplace risk involvement, including legal liability, wage and benefit comparison, and the mental health issues associated with staff shortages. Workplace risk involvement, including legal liability, is one of the leading causes of low recruitment numbers in the U.S. and in Malaysia. In an article titled Police Departments Nationwide Struggling with Recruitment Crisis Surge in Retirement, Mike Nealon, a spokesperson for the Philadelphia Fraternal Order of Police, stated, "We are anticipating that the department is going to be understaffed by several hundreds because hundreds of guys are either retiring or taking other jobs and leaving the department. Where officers were once willing to risk their lives for the greater good, we are now in an era where the greater good is just not worth the sacrifice for many officers. COVID-19 has brought about additional precautions that officers must take in order to stay safe. Many of their tasks involves coming in close contact with members of the general public. COVID is something that you cannot see, and officers are at an increased risk of contracting the virus throughout the course of a routine workday. At the end of the day, these officers have to go home to their families. Even though they may have been willing to put their lives on the lines to protect the lives of others, most of them are not willing to pose a pandemic threat against their own families. One of the problematic causes of low recruitment numbers during the pandemic is workplace risk involvement, including legal liability. Another problematic cause for poor recruitment numbers during the pandemic stems from wage and benefit comparison. According to the Department of Labor's website, for 13 weeks, an additional $600 was added to most individuals' unemployment payments. Many essential workers became highly upset and disappointed that there were millions of people at home safely, receiving an income equal to or greater than their own, while they were not only fighting to prevent themselves from becoming ill from COVID-19, but also having to fight with their employers for hazard pay. During these 13 weeks, civil discord was created, causing many officers to seek safer and higher paying jobs. Officers everywhere began to feel unappreciated, underpaid, and overworked. As a result of the decline in officers, recruiters began offering sign on bonuses and incentive pay. Although these perks have aided in the rebuilding process, police departments continue to struggle in the hiring department. One of the problematic causes of low recruitment numbers during the pandemic is wage and benefit comparison. Mental health issues associated with staff shortages are on the rise. In law enforcement, officers are being asked to work overtime due to an understaffed police department. The officers are going without sleep, healthy meals, and in some cases, medical attention. In many ways, this activity can cause psychological problems which pose dangers to the public that cannot be undone with the snap of a finger. Police officers are required to be mentally alert at all times. They are first responders, and most scenes that they are dispatched to requires them to be psychologically stable. In the 2021 film, The Guilty, a middle aged male officer by the name of Joe was ordered to work dispatch following legal issues that he had yet to stand trial for. Although the film wasn't about the pandemic, it still displayed the troubles of an understaffed police department along with the importance of psychological stability in police officers. In the midst of Joe's eagerness and determination to stop a crime in progress, his affected mental ability prevented him from recognizing a mentally ill patient in distress. Joe's affected psychological state caused him to perform a number of unacceptable actions that pose harm to the general public. Every day, police officers are being placed in difficult situations that may become detrimental to their cognitive abilities. As a result of this, many officers are retiring, resigning, and being put on administrative leave. One of the problematic causes of low recruitment numbers during the pandemic is from mental health issues associated with staff shortages. In conclusion, many reasons exist for why police recruitment during the pandemic is suffering. One cannot really blame anyone for not wanting to work under such threatening and dangerous circumstances. Whether it be risk involvement, wage and benefit comparison, or mental health issues, police departments are struggling to win in the area of recruitment. Despite the incentives, there are still not many choosing law enforcement as a career. As of now, police departments are still working on ways to recruit new hires during such trying and unsure times. The problematic cause of low recruitment numbers are workplace risk involvement, including legal liability, wage and benefit comparison, and mental health issues associated with staff shortages. This is my portion of the project. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Michelle Lau, which is from Malaysia campus. The part that I'm responsible for this group assignment is investigation on impact of COVID-19. I will explain in detail on crime cases during lockdowns in United States and Malaysia. In response to COVID-19 pandemic, Malaysia government had initiated stay-at-home orders start from 18th of March on year 2020. Through intent to stop the spread of the COVID-19 virus, the lockdowns have had sweeping impacts on life in ways which were not originally planned. This study's purpose is to investigate the extent to which governmental response to COVID-19 have impacted crime rates in Malaysia compared to the pre-pandemic year of 2019. COVID-19 has had such as big situation effect on individuals, and the lockdowns have imposed so many different issues, such as financial strain of family and all having to stay at home at once. First, I'm going to explain Malaysia parts, which is the column of the left. Kuala Lumpur Police Chief Datuk Sri Maslan stated that during the first phase of lockdown, the city crimes index dropped by 57.5% compared to the same period last year. He added that in the second phase of lockdown from 1st of April, Kuala Lumpur's crime rates dropped by 63% and violence crime and property crimes fell by 74.3% and 59% respectively. However, Tan Sri Lee Lin Tai, a senior vice chairman of the Malaysian Crimes Prevention Foundation, which we call MCPF, says that he believes the increase in unemployment in the country due to COVID-19 pandemic will lead to an increase in crime. The outbreak of pandemic has had a huge impact on crime in United States. Except for homicide and shooting, almost all types of crime have fallen sharply. Across almost all the cities examined, crime dropped with overall 23% in the first month of COVID lockdown and since remained lower than usual. Moreover, crime rate has remained at significantly levels relative to previous year, even after city eased their COVID restriction in late spring. This raises attention to the key question explored by this research study. Has crime in the United States and Malaysia changed in response to COVID-19 stay-at-home orders? If so, have it decreased in an unexpected benefit to the society or increased in another harm to society? As the number of COVID-19 cases in Malaysia reached a daily record high, the government finally announced a lockdown that will take effect start from 1st of June. The first phase of lockdown found that the domestic violence against women has risen sharply. The Women AIDS Organization, which we call WAO, a non-governmental organization that provides support to abused women and children, reports that between February before the lockdown and April when the lockdown was full in swing, calls for help increased by 360%. Even after the first lockdown was lifted, NGO continues to issue alarms of increased domestic violence. This is due to the strict movement control orders lead to the potential jobless and financial instability. According to the data from the Ministry of Statistics, after the first lockdown, Malaysia unemployment rate reached a record of 5.3%. This is not only the highest record since 1990, but the unemployment rate has also remained high and has not yet returned to its pre-crisis level. Moreover, as children drop off of school during the lockdown period, the demand for home care has increased exponentially, and more women are forced to abandon or reduce income generating activity and take care of home care full-time. Women's loss of financial security will reduce their say in decision making within the family. Interview indicate that the majority of respondents believe the instead of domestic violence and violence against children likely increased during the lockdown period. However, this say increase was difficulty to confirm through official data or elsewhere. This could be partially due to the lack of data collection and reporting during the lockdown and subsequent phase, as restriction on movement prevent government and NGO staff from visiting communities and meeting with the families and children directly. A few NGOs reported an increase in calls related to gender-based and another form of violence during the lockdown period based on the data generated from their own hotlines. The former channel parents and community members would generate utilize to report cases of abuse are JKM, going directly to the hospital or the police. However, the onset of COVID-19 was an unspeakably busy time for JKM officer as well as doctor and hospital staff, and there are no official reports of increase in case through these channels. In fact, the number of people visiting hospital dropped dramatically due to the movement restriction and possibility also due to the fear of infection according to a respondents. With a surge of COVID-19 cases in United States in March of 2020, the stay-at-home orders has been put in place. Schools are closed and many workers are taken leave, fired or told to work from home. As personal activities are restricted and people are confined at home, advocates are concerned about the potential increase in intimate partner violence, which we call IPV. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 10 men has experienced IPV. And violence can take many forms. It can be physical, emotional, sexual, or psychological. People of all race, cultures, gender, sexual orientation, socio-economic classes, and religion have experienced IPV. Economic instability, insecure housing, neighborhood violence, and lack of safe and stable childcare and social support can be exhibited and already fragile situation. This pandemic has led to an increase in unemployment, especially among women of color, immigrants, and workers without college education, thereby exhibiting financial entanglement. In this COVID-19 era, it has become more difficult to safe screen IPV patients to prevent patients from revealing the escalating abuse at home. This COVID-19 pandemic has brought many ongoing public health crises into focus, including domestic violence. This pandemic highlights how much work needs to be done to ensure that people who have been abused can continue to receive support, shelter, and medical service when another public health disaster strikes. Talk about impact of COVID-19 on specific group of children and families. This is some news that I read from online news. I found that the Malaysian and American manufacturers have the same experience with this pandemic. Firstly, according to the interview respondents, the most affected are the refugee and immigrant community in the country. It's Malaysian B40 families. They usually have limited saving or reserve to manage daily expenses to tide over these difficulties. Many families cannot provide enough food for their children, which increase the difficulties and vulnerability of children's health. While for United States, the economic situation has suddenly worsened with unprecedented rising levels of unemployment in the first 3 months of COVID-19 in US, resulting in financial hardship for many families. This has suddenly created a lot of challenge and put a lot of pressure in parents of schooling children. Even now, the economy recovers. The employment rate of Black and Hispanic workers is still higher than the white workers. The same is true for workers with lower levels of education compared to workers with the high levels of education. According to the data from Opportunity Insight a Harvard University project, low-paying employment is still about 20% lower than pre-pandemic levels. High-paying employment is about 10% higher than the pre-pandemic levels. Furthermore, at the beginning of MCO, many children, especially in East Malaysia, live in boarding school or homes away from their families, were sent back to their homes. Internet or phone lines are not available in some of the remote village. Thus, children in this place cannot attend the online class. As a result, many children have not received a formal education for several months, causing some students to fall behind in their schoolworks and face challenge after returning to school. At the same time, in US, during the lockdown of COVID-19 pandemic, millions of children are at greater risk of harm as they are live increasing shift online. This is because many of these students are now taking classes as well as socializing more online. Spending more time on visual platform can leave children vulnerable to online sexual exploitation and grooming. That's all for my part. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I am Andrea Chan and I will be presenting the effects of COVID on scamming. As COVID-19 outbreak continues to impact the whole world, the number of fraud occurring also increases. While countries and its citizens better to contain the virus and staying safe, there are people who will take advantage of the situation to scam people. In this COVID era, any scams that you know of, which you can see over here in the common column, can potentially be associated with COVID-19 or without any link with the COVID-19. And then there are the new scams that are related to the pandemic. Both countries have almost similar new types of scams, such as the COVID test kit and vaccines and treatments. EPF in Malaysia is a saving plan and retirement planning for its people. As there is a new trend in the scamming department, the statistical data of scams in both countries are on the rise. From 2017 to 2020, Malaysia has about 68,000 cases with losses of 2.23 billion ringgit Malaysia. E-commerce scams have the most reported cases, followed by the illegal loans and investment. From 2019 to 2020, US has 4.8 million cases, and in 2020 alone, with losses of 1.5 billion US dollars. Identity theft is the highest among all types of scam, followed by imposter, online shopping, romance, lottery, and telephone scams. Such high prevalence of scam cases in both countries is not that surprising. The situation is almost similar to the tendency of scams that occur during the festivals and historical events that gather people's attention and consideration. For example, donation scams during the bushfire in Australia, online shopping scams during the China's Singles Day, and Facebook phishing scam that charge customers to watch UK live stream. As for the pandemic, it caters to a much wider coverage of a population in which many people are inclined to participate or connect with available media. So as a result, people are increasing their chances of being exploited. Moving on, the effects of COVID on scamming are fear, greed, and altruistic behavior. The pandemic creates fear in people. So fear refers to an adaptive response to danger, thereby serving as a motivator for individuals to take cautionary measures in order to follow the COVID-19 related guidelines and to avoid infection. People who suffer extreme fear might have a greater risk perception. So as a result, this emotional reaction fails to supply appropriate information as adaptive responses to fear becomes disruptive. So in this case, fear makes the individuals prone to mistakes in decision making and assessment because their attention is concentrated on eliminating substantial risk for personal health. For example, Macau scams that says you are a suspect of money laundering, and imposter scams that tells you that you have made a transaction without your consent. So both of these scams cause fear to the victims. In order to dispel fear, the victims follow the scammer's instructions. Moving on, the pandemic also creates greed in people. Reinhold Niebuhr proposed that greed stems from the profound feelings of existential dread or anxiety that is a natural element to the human condition. Humans are vulnerable to the force. Sorry, there's a connection problem. I think I have to share the screen again. All right, where was I? So in order to cope with the feeling of dread, people seek assurance by holding on to things that are desirable or any means of security, for example, education, knowledge, reputation, and monetary items. So for the pandemic, it creates scarcity in many aspects that relate to people's life. For example, the shortage of medical supplies and food, job loss, businesses closing down. When people are unable to cope with their losses, they are inclined to resort to various means to survive. So which provides the perfect opportunity for scammers to gain something from their targets. All right, so scammers usually persuade their victims with the promise of high returns. For example, an investment scam in Malaysia that guaranteed 10 to 20% profit within 24 hours, while in the US, the FTC reported that a surge in the numbers of cryptocurrency investment scam that can be seen from October 2020 to March 2021, with more than 80 million US dollars of losses. So this cryptocurrency investment scam usually use the tactics of investment tires, fake testimonials, celebrity impersonators, and online dating. Another effects of COVID-19 on scamming is the tendency of altruistic behavior. So scammers could take advantage of the individual's philanthropic attitude and their determination to offer support during this difficult time. So due to the difficulties that the pandemic caused, people would work together to assist one another to survive in this cruel situation that they are in. The government, non-profit organization, and the local communities are seen to provide humanitarian assistance to people who are in need. So, for example, Caremongering Malaysia is an online Facebook group that provides assistance in the form of essential items and food distributions and donation. While in the US, the government has announced that more than 25 million face masks will be distributed to the health centers, soup kitchens, and food pantries across the country. Altruistic behavior can be seen from scams such as e-commerce scam and donation scam. Scarcity is used as a persuasive strategy in the e-commerce scams. The rise of pandemic causes the world to be unprepared, so leading to a shortage of face masks and medical supplies, whereby companies have to increase their mass production in a short period of time. So in this situation, people might attempt to purchase more for themselves and maybe for their close one. An example can be seen from Malaysia. There is 556 scams, face mask scams during the movement control order. So these scams are mostly advertised in social media platforms such as the Facebook and Instagram. Another type of scams that exploit people's altruistic behavior is the donation scam. So these scams appear in the response to crises or actual disasters, for example, the pandemic, natural disasters, or even to support a cause. So a non-existent orphanage in Malaysia and a charity in the US that's supposed to be distributed to those who are in need, but instead those donated clothing was sold and the scammers pocketed the money. The effects of COVID-19 have caused an increase in people's fear, greed, and altruistic behavior that can be exploited by the scammers. So as COVID-19 will be here for the time being, it would be advisable for organizations involved to make necessary initiatives such as devising and executing measures in order to minimize illegal crimes. In Malaysia, organizations such as the newspaper, publishers, media companies, PDRM, MACC, MCMC, CCID, and banks, they are the mediums that can share information to its citizens. I found that most of the information related to scamming can be found in newspaper, such as the Star, New Straits Times, China Press, and so on. Malaysians can also report to organizations such as the PDRM, MACC, MCMC, CCID, and the banks when they encounter frauds or scams. Other organizations such as the Central Bank of Malaysia issue a scam alert to the public about a scam that sends a text message coming from the bank, which directs the recipients to a message to a website that requests personal information. Another efforts can be seen through is the collaboration of the MCMC with 15 telecommunication operators in Malaysia to organize a prevention awareness movement to educate the public by implementing correct methods to minimize scam cases, recognize illegal crimes, and knowing how and where to report these crimes. For in the US, agencies such as the US Department of Justice, United States Court of Federal Claims, FBI, FTC, and media companies, they are the ones that share the scam alerts and information to the public. Organizations such as the Bank of America informs the public that the bank does not request personal information through email, phone calls, or text messages. Americans can report to FTC as it is the main agency that gathers scam report. They can even report to the State Consumer Protection Office, federal government for any types of scam. The US also caters to specific types of scams which the people can report to, which are the SSA, IC3, IRS, Credit Reporting Agency, and National Center for Disaster Fraud. The country also has a federal emergency management agency that educates the public in spotting coronavirus facts from rumors, which can be very beneficial to the public to avoid COVID-19 related scams. So the way in which scammers operate their scams are almost similar around the world, where their main motivator to trick people is getting money. So as the pandemic persists to exist, so with the increase of scams around the world with new tricks and are associated with the pandemic, or the common tactics to exploit people's fear, greed, and altruistic behavior. Although both countries are taking measures to help its people, it is also important for the people to be aware of what is happening around them. And the people should work hand in hand with the organization measures and efforts to maximize the effectiveness in reducing scams. To conclude everything, the legal systems plays a fundamental role in managing the pandemic, and we have discussed the impact of COVID-19 on the legal system, forensic psychologists, and scamming among US and Malaysia. So from comparing the differences on the influence brought by the pandemic, we believe that the substantial differences in cultural, court and law system, digital literacy, and other factors distinguish Malaysia and the US. The pandemic certainly caught many members of the forensic and the public unprepared. So, and the government response to the pandemic continues to evolve. So this report devotes highest gratitude and appreciate all the efforts of the frontliners, especially the health care workers, the defense team, and the police forces. The following slides are the reference for this topic, scamming. Thank you everyone for watching and have a great day. Bye-bye.